You are nothing but trash, and honestly, you belong in the garbage. Those were the harsh words that echoed through the lobby, freezing everyone in their tracks. It's the kind of arrogance that makes your blood boil, isn't it? We have all seen a rude client or a power-hungry boss treating a cleaner like they are invisible, or worse, subhuman. It makes you question if common decency is dead, leaving you desperate for a sliver of justice. But hold on tight, because in this story, things are not what they seem. Meet Jacob Simpson, a man who thinks his expensive suit gives him the right to crush others. And meet Maggie Winslow, the quiet woman scrubbing the floors he walks on. Jacob sees a nobody, a target for his cruel office drama. But here is the shocking reveal he never saw coming. Maggie isn't just cleaning the building, she owns it. She is the undercover CEO, and while Jacob thinks he is humiliating a helpless worker, he is actually auditioning for his own exit. This isn't just a story about a job interview gone wrong, it is a masterclass in instant regret. Jacob is about to learn a brutal life lesson: never look down on someone unless you are helping them up. As he pushes for a deal with a business tycoon, he has no idea he is digging his own grave with every insult. You are about to witness a roller coaster of workplace harassment turning into the most satisfying sweet revenge you have ever seen. It is a heart-touching reminder that karma never loses an address. Before we watch this billionaire humiliate himself in the most public way possible, take a second to join our family. If you believe that character is worth more than a bank account, hit that subscribe button. Like this video to show your support for the hardworking invisible heroes among us, and let's dive into this saga of don't judge a book by its cover. Because today, the trash is taking itself out. The morning sun was streaming through the glass doors of the Winslow Enterprises tower, but the atmosphere inside was about to turn icy cold. Jacob Simpson strode into the lobby like he owned the place, checking his reflection in the polished marble walls with pure arrogance. He was there for the biggest job interview of his life, or rather, a merger discussion that would make him a legend. However, his path was blocked by a yellow bucket and a caution wet floor sign that he deemed an unnecessary obstacle for a man of his stature. He didn't just walk around it, he scoffed, checking his expensive watch with an air of supreme impatience that signaled trouble. Right in front of him, Maggie Winslow, dressed in oversized blue coveralls that had seen better days, was scrubbing a stubborn coffee stain. To Jacob, she wasn't a person, she was just a cleaner, a piece of furniture that had malfunctioned. As he brushed past, distracted by a notification on his phone, he clipped the side of her bucket. Dirty water sloshed onto his pristine Italian leather shoes. The silence that followed was deafening. The entire lobby froze, sensing the impending office drama. It wasn't a massive spill, but for a man like Jacob, it was a declaration of war against his ego. Are you blind, or just stupid? Jacob barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings, causing the receptionist to flinch visibly. He didn't offer a hand to steady the bucket. Instead, he looked down at his wet shoe with a look of utter disgust, as if he had been touched by a plague. Maggie, keeping her head down, mumbled a quiet apology, grabbing a rag to wipe the floor near his feet. It was a moment of instant regret for anyone watching, feeling the second-hand embarrassment of witnessing such a rude client berate a worker who was simply doing her job. "Don't touch me with those filthy rags." He recoiled, kicking the cloth away from his foot. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost? More than you make in a year, I guarantee it." The cruelty was sharp and unnecessary. It wasn't just about the shoes, it was a display of power. He wanted to ensure that everyone in the lobby knew the hierarchy. He was the business tycoon in waiting, and she was the dirt beneath his feet. It was the kind of workplace harassment that usually goes unchecked because people are too afraid to speak up against money and power. Maggie didn't fight back. She simply pulled her hand away, her eyes fixed on the linoleum, absorbing the venom with a practiced patience. She had seen men like Jacob 1,000 times before, men who confuse net worth with self-worth. "I am very sorry, sir. I will have it cleaned up in a second," she said, her voice steady but low. Jacob scoffed, pulling out a handkerchief to dab his shoe himself, making a show of how inconvenienced he was. "Pathetic," he muttered, loud enough for the security guard to hear. They really will hire anyone these days. The onlookers shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the furious executive and the hunched cleaner. It was a classic scene of injustice, creating a heavy knot in the stomach of every witness. You could feel the tension in the air, a silent plea for someone to intervene. If you were standing in that lobby, watching him kick that rag away, what is the one word that would scream in your mind? Disgust? Anger? Hold on to that feeling, because karma has a way of keeping score. Jacob finally stepped over the wet spot, shaking his head as he headed toward the elevators. Get this mess cleaned up before I come back down, or I'll have you fired before lunch, he threw over his shoulder. He pressed the elevator button aggressively, adjusting his tie, completely unaware that the shocking reveal awaiting him upstairs would shatter his reality. He thought he had just kicked a nobody. He had no idea he had just insulted the woman whose name was on the building. Once the elevator doors slid shut, swallowing Jacob's toxic energy, Maggie Winslow slowly stood up. She wasn't a frail old woman she pretended to be. Beneath that gray wig and the baggy uniform was a sharp mind that had built an empire from scratch. This was her company, her legacy. She had decided to become the undercover CEO, not to spy on productivity, but to check the pulse of her organization's soul. She wanted to know if the values she preached were actually being practiced when the boardroom doors were closed and the cameras were off. Her back ached a little. Cleaning floors is hard labor, something she never forgot from her early days, but her resolve was harder. She had heard rumors of a toxic culture seeping into the executive wing, stories of workplace harassment and a general disdain for the support staff. Being the boss in a corner office often meant being lied to by yes men who only showed you the spreadsheets, never the tears in the break room. To find the truth, she had to become invisible. She had to become the cleaner, the one person everyone ignores, and therefore, the one person who sees everything. This mission was personal.
Maggie remembered what it was like to be invisible, to work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. She built this company on the principle of dignity for every worker, from the penthouse to the parking garage. Seeing Jacob Simpson, a man her board was pushing to bring in as a partner, treat a human being like garbage confirmed her worst fears. It was a heart-touching reminder of why she started this, to create a sanctuary, not a slaughterhouse. She wasn't just looking for a business partner. She was looking for a successor who understood that profit, without people, is meaningless. She dipped the mop back into the bucket, the water turning gray. Much like her mood, the office drama she just witnessed wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a disease she needed to cure. Jacob was a prime suspect, a hotshot billionaire wannabe with a reputation for aggressive takeovers and even more aggressive layoffs. He was here to pitch a merger that would supposedly skyrocket their stocks. But Maggie knew that some prices were too high to pay. If he treated a stranger this way, how would he treat her employees when he had actual power over them? It's a strange thing, isn't it? We often think power reveals character, but anonymity reveals it even better. When people think no one of consequence is watching, the mask slips. Maggie was the ultimate test, a living, breathing moral exam that Jacob was currently failing with flying colors. She adjusted her glasses, which were smudged with purpose, and wheeled her cart toward the service elevator. She needed to get to the 40th floor. She needed to be in a room where it happened not as a CEO, but as a shadow in the corner. This wasn't about entrapment, it was about protection. She had a duty to the receptionist who flinched, to the security guard who looked away, and to every employee who feared being fired for breathing wrong. This secret mission was the only way to ensure that justice would be served. She took a deep breath, centering herself. The humiliation she felt downstairs was fuel. She would endure the disrespect, the invisibility, and the mockery because she knew something they didn't. Think about the last time you felt invisible at work or in life. It hurts, doesn't it? Now, imagine having the power to change that, but having to wait for the perfect moment to strike. That is the discipline of a true leader. Smash that like button if you respect a leader who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty to protect their team. Maggie stepped into the service elevator, the numbers climbing higher, bringing her closer to the man who thought she was trash. The game was on. On the 40th floor, the air was different conditioned to a crisp, expensive chill. Jacob Simpson sat in the glass-wall conference room, spreading his documents across a mahogany table with the precision of a predator preparing a kill. This was the deal of the century. He was pitching to the board of Winslow Enterprises, and although the reclusive CEO, M. Winslow, was rumored to be absent, Jacob was confident he could charm the proxies. He was a business tycoon in his own mind, a shark swimming in a tank of guppies. He tapped his pen on the table, annoyed that the meeting hadn't started yet. He pulled out his phone, dialing his broker. "Yeah, I'm in the building." "It's in the bag," he boasted, his voice carrying that distinct tone of arrogance. "The culture here? Soft. Weak. They treat the help like family. It's pathetic. Once I sign this, we're cutting the fat, starting with the maintenance crew and that senile receptionist downstairs." He laughed, a cold, hollow sound that bounced off the glass walls. He didn't care who heard him because to him, the people outside that room were just background noise. Jacob's philosophy was simple: the world is divided into winners and losers. The winners wear suits, the losers wear name tags. He had zero concept of don't judge. In his world, judgment was the primary tool of navigation. He looked at the empty chairs around him, visualizing his victory. He planned to automate half the workforce, outsource the customer service, and strip the company of its sentimental policies. He called efficiency Maggie, who was listening from the hallway, would call a massacre. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. From this height, people were just ants, which was exactly how he liked it. It's easier to crush things when they look small. He checked his reflection again, fixing a stray hair. "You're a king, Jacob," he whispered to himself. He was completely oblivious to the karma that was slowly circling him. He truly believed that his wealth and his status insulated him from the consequences of his behavior. It's the fatal flaw of the narcissist, the belief that they're the main character in everyone else's story. Just then, the door creaked open. Jacob spun around, expecting a VP or a director. Instead, he saw the cleaning lady from the lobby, Maggie, pushing her cart into the room. His face fell. "You gotta be kidding me," he groaned, rolling his eyes. "I thought I told you to clean the lobby. Are you stalking me?" He didn't see a human being. He saw a disruption. He saw dirt invading his sanctuary of high finance. The contrast was stark: the man obsessed with image versus the woman obsessed with substance. "Just emptying the bins, sir." "Won't be a minute," Maggie said, her voice raspy. She moved with a deliberate slowness, gauging his reaction. Jacob sighed loudly, sitting back down and dramatically checking his watch. Unbelievable. I'm about to close a billion-dollar merger, and I'm stuck in a room with the help. "Hey, don't touch those papers." He snapped as she dusted near his portfolio. The rude client persona wasn't a mask, it was a skin. We have all met a Jacob, someone who kisses up to the powerful and kicks down at the powerless. It's a strategy that works, until it doesn't. But here's the question: does success excuse cruelty? If he wins his deal, hundreds lose their jobs. The stakes couldn't be higher. Jacob watched her like a hawk, waiting for her to make a mistake so he could scream again. He didn't realize that in this room, he was the one being interviewed, and he was failing the only question that mattered. Maggie moved around the conference room, her head down, playing the part of the invisible cleaner to perfection. She sprayed the glass, squeaking the cloth against the surface, a sound that clearly irritated Jacob. But while her hands were busy, her ears were wide open. Jacob, assuming she was too uneducated to understand corporate lingo, continued his phone call, switching to a hushed but intense tone. "Listen, Mike, the old lady running this place Winslow's ancient history. Rumor is she's gone senile. We leverage the buyout, strip the assets, and sell off the real estate. The pension fund alone is worth millions if we liquidate it." Maggie's heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't just a merger. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership. He wasn't planning to grow the company. He was planning to gut it. The pension fund he mentioned belonged to people like the receptionist, the security guards, the very people he despised. This was shocking reveal number one. His ruthless strategy was worse than she imagined. He was going to steal the future of thousands of families to pad his own golden parachute. Yeah, I know. Jacob chuckled, put his feet up on the tablia, sign of ultimate disrespect. Well, frame the layoffs as restructuring. Get rid of the dead weight. Anyone over 50 goes. Cheaper to hire fresh grads and burn them out in 2 years. Maggie gripped the handle of her mop tighter. This man was a monster, in a three-piece suit. It was a classic case of arrogance blinding him to the risk of speaking so freely. He deemed her a non-factor, a piece of furniture with ears that didn't work. She moved closer to the trash bin near him to change the liner. "Excuse me, sir," she whispered. He didn't even look at her. He just waved his hand dismissively as if swatting a fly. "Just get it done and get out," he hissed, covering the mouthpiece's phone. "I'm trying to discuss serious business here. Something your brain wouldn't comprehend." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The woman he was insulting had written the bylaws he was planning to shred. Maggie needed to know more. She needed to know the timeline. She purposely dropped a roll of trash bags to create a diversion, hoping he would say something about the signing. "Clumsy oaf," Jacob muttered. Then, "Back to the phone we signed at 2 p.m. Once the ink is dry, I'm firing the entire janitorial staff immediately. Well, hire a third-party service for half the cost. No benefits, no insurance. Pure profit." Hearing this, Maggie felt a cold fury. This was workplace harassment on a systemic level. He was casually planning to destroy lives for a percentage point on a graph. It was a job interview for the role of villain, and he was acing it. She finished tying the bag, her hands trembling slightly not from age, but from rage. She had heard enough to know that Jacob Simpson wasn't just a rude client, he was a threat to everything she held dear. It is terrifying how easily some people play with the livelihoods of others. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many decisions about your life were made in a room like this, by a man like him, while you were just working hard to survive? The injustice burns. Maggie wheeled her cart toward the door. She had the intel. Now, she needed to see just how deep his lack of humanity went. The real test was yet to come. It was noon, and the boardroom was temporarily empty as Jacob took a break, pacing the hallway, visibly stressed about the upcoming meeting with the board. He was hungry, agitated, and his patience was thinner than a strand of hair. Maggie, still in her disguise, was sitting on a small bench in the corridor, unwrapping a modest lunch wrapped in foil. She saw him pacing and decided to execute the next phase of her evaluation, the test of basic humanity. It's simple. How do you treat someone who offers you kindness when they have nothing to gain? She pulled a shiny red apple from her bag. It was simple, humble, and sincere. As Jacob stormed past her, muttering about delays, she cleared her throat. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice gentle. Jacob stopped, spinning on his heel with a look of exasperation. "What now? I told you to stay out of my way." Maggie held out the apple with a trembling hand. "You look stressed, young man. You haven't eaten. My grandson says an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Please take it." It was a heart-touching gesture. A woman who clearly had very little was offering to share her lunch to a billionaire who could buy an orchard. For a second, time seemed to hang in the air. A normal person would say no thank you, or perhaps even accept it with a smile. But Jacob saw it as an insult. He saw a peasant offering scraps to a king. The arrogance flared in his eyes like a sudden fire. "Are you serious?" He laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "You think I eat that? I don't know where your hands have been cleaning toilets all day." And then he did the unthinkable. He didn't just refuse it. He swiped his hand out and knocked the apple from her grip. The fruit tumbled across the carpet, bruising as it hit the wall. "Get that garbage out of my face. I eat at 5-star restaurants, not from the lunchbox of janitor." Maggie watched the apple roll away, her expression unreadable. Inside, her heart broke a little, not for herself, but for him. He was so poor, all he had was money. "It was just a kindness, sir," she said softly. "Kindness?" Jacob sneered. "Kindness doesn't buy yachts. Ambition does. You should try it sometime. Maybe you wouldn't be scrubbing floors at your age." It was a moment of instant regret for anyone witnessing it, a clear display that his soul was bankrupt. Here's a dilemma, and be honest with yourself. If you were in Maggie's shoes, Seeing that apple on the floor, would you have walked away right then and fired him on the spot? Or would you keep pushing to see if there is any good left in him? It takes a saint to endure this level of humiliation. Maggie slowly stood up and walked over to pick up the apple. She wiped it off on her apron. Waste not, want not, she whispered. This wasn't just about an apple. This was a lunch break test, and Jacob had failed spectacularly. He had proven that his cruelty wasn't just professional, it was personal. He despised weakness, or what he perceived as weakness. He had no room in his life for charity or connection. He was a rude client to the universe. Maggie pocketed the apple. The final verdict was getting easier to write, but the office drama was about to escalate. He had rejected her kindness. Now he would have to deal with her justice. The afternoon wore on, and the tension on the executive floor was palpable. Jacob was sitting in the waiting area now, the big meeting minutes away. He was meticulously polishing his Rolex, ensuring it caught the light just right. It was a limited edition, worth more than a house, a symbol of his status as a business tycoon. Maggie was nearby, sweeping the carpet a redundant task, but one that kept her in his orbit. The rhythmic sound of the broom seemed to grate on Jacob's nerves. He looked up from his watch, his eyes landing on Maggie's feet. She was wearing old, comfortable sneakers, frayed at the edges and held together by sheer willpower. To Jacob, they were offensive. "Hey," he called out, snapping his fingers. "Don't you people have a dress code? Those shoes are an eyesore." He held up his wrist, flashing the gold and diamonds. "See this? This is precision. This is success. Those things on your feet, they scream failure." Maggie stopped sweeping and looked at her shoes. They were the shoes she wore to walk to work, the shoes she wore to volunteer at the shelter. "They get me where I need to go, sir," she replied simply. Jacob laughed, shaking his head. "That's the problem with your class. You're satisfied with good enough. I wear Italian leather because I demand the best. You wear trash because you have no self-respect." He was intentionally trying to make her feel humiliated, using his wealth as a weapon. "Maybe some people value other things more than leather," Maggie suggested, a hint of steel in her voice. Jacob narrowed his eyes. "Like what? Dignity? You're cleaning up other people's dirt. Don't talk to me about values." He leaned forward, his face twisted in a sneer. "You know, when I take over, the first thing I'm changing is a uniform policy. We can't have people like you looking like hobos in a billion-dollar building. It's bad for the brand." It was a striking contrast, a man with the expensive watch who had no time for human decency, and the woman with the worn-out shoes who walked with integrity. Jacob thought he was flaunting his superiority, but he was actually revealing his insecurity. He needed to put her down to feel tall. It was a classic bully tactic, a form of workplace harassment that relies on the silence of the victim. But Maggie wasn't silent inside. She was taking mental notes. "You might find, sir, that shoes don't make the man," Maggie said, meeting his gaze for a brief second. Jacob scoffed, turning back to his phone. "Whatever. Just sweep somewhere else. You're ruining the view." He dismissed her like a servant, unaware that the view he was worried about was actually the shocking reveal of his own character. He was so busy admiring his reflection in the watch face that he couldn't see the cliff he was walking toward. We live in a world obsessed with brands and labels. Jacob is the extreme of theta man who thinks his price tag is his value. But let's validate our values here. Press the like button if you believe that a person's worth is measured by their heart, not their wallet. Let's show Jacob he is outnumbered. Maggie moved away, the sound of her worn-out shoes soft on the carpet. She didn't need a Rolex to know that Jacob's time was running out. Just as Jacob finished berating Maggie, a young intern named Leo rushed into the hallway, carrying a stack of files that looked too heavy for him. He was frantic, sweat beading on his forehead. In his rush, he tripped over his own feet, sending the papers flying across the floor like a snowstorm. It was a nightmare scenario. Jacob, witnessing this, threw his head back and groaned. "Oh, for God's sake, is everyone in this building incompetent?" He shouted. "Look at you. You're a disaster." Leo was trembling, scrambling to pick up the papers. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Simpson." Jacob cut him off. "Don't sorry me. Just clean it up before I call HR." and have you thrown out with the trash." He pointed at Maggie. "You two belong together." The loser club. Jacob didn't lift a finger. He stood there, arms crossed, enjoying the power trip. He was the rude client from hell, treating the intern like a bug under a microscope. But then Maggie moved. She didn't hesitate. She dropped her broom and knelt beside Leo. "It's all right, son," she said, her voice soothing. Deep breaths. "We'll get this sorted in no time." Her hands, rough from work but gentle in touch, helped him gather the documents. "Don't mind him," she whispered, winking at Leo. Some people make noise just to hear themselves talk. Leo looked at her with tear-filled eyes, finding an anchor in her calmness. "Thank you," he breathed. The contrast was blinding. Jacob stood above them, a pillar of arrogance and judgment. Maggie knelt on the floor, a beacon of heart-touching empathy. She wasn't just helping him with papers, she was saving his dignity. She organized the files neatly and handed them back to Leo. "You're doing a great job, Leo. I've seen you working late. Keep your head up," she encouraged him. It was a moment of pure mentorship from the most unlikely source. Jacob sneered at the display. How touching. The janitor giving career advice. That's rich. He checked his watch again. "If you're done holding hands, I have a meeting to prepare for." But the dynamic in the hallway had shifted. Leo stood up straighter, bolstered by Maggie's kindness. "He'll have the files ready, sir," Leo said, his voice steadier. Maggie patted his shoulder, a silent transfer of strength. This scene was critical. It showed that leadership isn't about titles, it's about action. Jacob was a boss by definition, but Maggie was a leader by nature. She understood that a company is built on people, on moments of support like this. Jacob saw people as cogs, Maggie saw them as souls. This don't judge moment was a final proof she needed that Jacob will be a cancer to her company culture. He didn't just hate her, he hated anyone who was learning, struggling, or growing. Look at that image, the billionaire standing uselessly while the cleaner leads. It's a powerful lesson. Who would you rather work for? The one who yells when you fall, or the one who helps you stand up? Drop a comment with Team Maggie if you believe in lifting others up. Maggie picked up her broom again. She had saved the intern, but now she had to save the company. The sweet revenge was brewing, and it was going to be served cold. The clock struck 1:50 p.m. 10 minutes to the big meeting. Jacob was pacing nervously now, the reality of the merger weighing on him. He stopped in front of a mirrored panel and cursed. "My tie, it's crooked." He fumbled with the silk knot, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline and caffeine. The more he pulled, the worse it got. He was a business tycoon coming undone by a piece of fabric. He looked around for help, but the hallway was empty except for Maggie. She was there, quietly wiping down a plant pot. She saw his struggle. Despite everything, the insults, the kicked apple, the mockery, she set her rag down and approached him. "May I?" she asked softly. Jacob froze. He looked at her, ready to bark another insult, but he was desperate. He couldn't walk into the boardroom looking disheveled. He hesitated, then grunted, dropping his hands. "Make it quick, and don't get dirt on my shirt." Even in need, he was a rude client. Maggie stepped into his personal space. Her eyes were calm behind her glasses. She reached up, her hands deft and precise. She undid the messy knot and began to retie it. "My father used to say a Windsor not as a sign of composed man," she said, her voice conversational. "You have a lot riding on this, don't you, Jacob?" It was the first time she used his name. He blinked, startled by the intimacy and the lack of fear in her voice. For a few seconds, the office drama paused. There was a strange silence. Jacob looked down at this old woman, this nobody, fixing him up for his moment of glory. He felt a flicker of confusion. Why was she helping him? He had been nothing but a monster to her. It was a life lesson in grace that his brain couldn't compute. "Yeah, well, it's a big deal," he muttered, his arrogance momentarily deflated by her proximity. "Just remember," Maggie said, sliding the knot up perfectly centered. "Integrity holds tighter than any knot." She patted his lapel, smoothing it out. "There, you look ready." She stepped back, returning to her role as the invisible cleaner. Jacob touched the tie. It was perfect, better than he could have done. He looked at her, a mix of suspicion and begrudging relief on his face. Humph. Finally, you made yourself useful, he said, the walls of his ego slamming back up. He couldn't let himself be grateful to a janitor. It would ruin his narrative. Don't expect a tip, he added, turning away to check his reflection again. He missed the sadness in Maggie's eyes. She had given him one last chance to say thank you, one last chance to be human. He had rejected it. This moment, right here, this is what we call grace. Meeting cruelty with kindness, not because they deserve it, but because it's who you are. It confuses the enemy. Jacob doesn't know how to handle it. He thinks he won this interaction, but he actually just sealed his fate. Maggie picked up her bucket. The tie was fixed, but the man wearing it was broken beyond repair. The time for grace was over. The time for justice had arrived. The meeting was about to start, but Jacob had one loose end to tie up. He didn't want Maggie hovering around during the merger. Her presence annoyed him, reminding him of the lower class he tried so hard to avoid. He needed her gone permanently. A dark idea formed in his mind. He looked at the conference table where a gold-plated fountain painted gift for the CEO's signing was resting. It was worth thousands. A plan of sweet revenge against a woman who had done nothing but exist formed in his twisted mind. "Hey, you!" Jacob called out to Maggie, who was near the door. "Come here. There's a smudge on the table right here." Maggie sighed and walked over. "Where, sir?" As she leaned in to look at the spotless surface, Jacob slayed a fan, swiped the pen, and dropped it into the open pocket of her apron while her back was turned. It was a move smooth enough for a magician or a criminal. "Never mind, it's gone," he said quickly, stepping back with a smirk. He waited until she was halfway to the door before shouting, "Wait a minute, where's the signing pen?" It was right here. He began making a scene, throwing papers around. "My God, it's gone. That pen is worth 5,000. He pointed an accusatory finger at Maggie. She was the only one near the table. She took it. The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. It was a setup pure and simple. A billionaire framing a cleaner to flex his power. Maggie stopped, turning around slowly. She felt the weight in her pocket. She knew exactly what had happened. "Sir, I haven't taken anything," she said calmly. Jacob marched over, his face red with fake outrage. "Don't lie to me. I saw you eyeing it. Security. Get security up here now." He grabbed her apron pocket and pulled out the gold pen, holding it up like a trophy. "Aha! Caught red-handed. You thief." The office drama hit its peak. He had planted the evidence to ensure she was humiliated and removed. "I knew you were trash," Jacob spat. "Stealing from the people who pay you. You're disgusting." He was reveling in his victory, thinking he was smart, thinking he was untouchable. He didn't see the calmness in Maggie's eyes. He mistook her silence for fear, when it was actually the calm before the storm. "You planted that," Maggie stated, her voice unwavering. "Who would believe you?" Jacob whispered, leaning close to her ear with a devilish grin. "In the partner. You're the help. My word is law." It was a chilling display of workplace harassment escalated to a crime. He was willing to destroy her reputation just to get her out of the room. This is the point where your blood boils. The injustice is so raw. He thinks he is playing chess, but he doesn't realize he just checkmated himself. He just accused the owner of the pen of stealing her own property. The irony is going to be delicious. Jacob waved at the security guard, running down the hall. "Take this thief out of my sight. I want her fired and charged." The security guards, two burly men named Mike and Dave, who actually knew Maggie, though they didn't recognize her in the wig and makeup at first glance, rushed in. "What's the problem here, Mr. Simpson?" Mike asked, looking confused. "The problem is this woman is a thief." Jacob yelled, thrusting the pen at them. "I caught her stealing the ceremonial pen. Get her out of the building immediately. I want her gone before the CEO arrives." Maggie looked at the guards. She could have broken character right there. She could have ended it, but she needed the play to finish. She needed Jacob to feel the full weight of his victory before the fall. So she played the victim. She let her shoulders slump. She let a few tears, real tears of disappointment and humanity fall. "I didn't steal it," she sobbed softly, playing into the role of the helpless cleaner. "Please, I need this job." "Save the tears with police," Jacob sneered, turning his back on her to adjust his suit. "Get her out." The guards, looking hesitant and sensing something was off but bound by the apparent evidence, gently took Maggie by the arms. "Come on, ma'am. Let's go," Mike said gently. As they escorted her out, the entire floor watched. It was a walk of shame for Maggie, but a walk of triumph for Jacob. He had successfully fired the nuisance. As the elevator doors closed on Maggie's tear-streaked face, Jacob let out a sigh of relief. Finally, the air is cleaner already. He joked to the empty room. He had no remorse, no instant regret, just the satisfaction of a bully who had crushed a weak target. He believed the trash had been taken out. He didn't know that the trash was about to go to the executive suite and change clothes. Inside the elevator, as soon as the doors shut, Maggie's tears stopped instantly. She straightened her back. The guards looked at her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "That didn't look right," Mike said. Maggie pulled off her gray wig, revealing her natural hair. She took off her glasses. "I'm fine, Mike, but Mr. Simpson won't be." The guard's jaws dropped. "Ms. Winslow?" Mike gasped. She put a finger to her lips. "Take me to my private office. I have a suit to put on." The shocking reveal was in motion that Jacob had just evicted the judge, jury, and execution of his career. He thought it had cleared the stage for his big moment, but it actually just set the stage for his own funeral. The justice train was leaving the station. "I need you to check in with your emotions right now." Seeing her escort out, how angry did that make you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to see Jacob's face when she walks back in? Hold that anger converted into anticipation. The payoff is coming. Maggie stepped out on the penthouse floor, ready to shed the cleaner skin, and reveal the business tycoon underneath. Alone in the conference room, Jacob was on cloud 9. He did a little victory lap around the table. "Too easy," he muttered. He poured himself a glass of water, treating it like fine champagne. He checked his phone and sent a text his buddies just cleared out the dead weight. "Deal is 100 happening to champagne on me tonight." The arrogance was dripping from every pore. He felt invincible. He sat down in the CEO's chair at the head of the table, a presumptuous move, but he felt he had earned it. He spun around, imagining himself ruling the company. Jacob Simpson, CEO. He practiced saying aloud. He had no idea that the real CEO was currently 3 floors up, stepping into a Taylor Chanel suit and applying power red lipstick. He believed his narrative: the strong survive, the weak and the cleaners perish. He looked at the spot where Maggie had stood, pathetic old woman. He laughed, probably crying in the alleyway now that his cruelty knew no bounds, because he lacked empathy that he couldn't imagine the inner life of others to him. There were NPCs, non-playable characters in his video game. He checked the time, 2:00 p.m. The board members were starting to file, and "Good afternoon, gentlemen." Jacob greeted them with a charming smile, completely switching masks that ready to make history. The board members nodded, taking their seats. "Where's MS Winslow?" One asked. "Oh, she'll be here," Jacob assured them. "I'm sure she's just." That freshening up, he had no idea how right he was that he opened his portfolio. The papers crisp and white. The high-stakes deal was moments away. He felt the weight of the gold pen in his pocket, the one he had recovered from the thief. He planned to use it to sign the deal, a poetic touch. He thought using the tool of his victory to seal his fate. He was so confident, so sure the office drama was over. But the air in the room shifted. A strange silence fell over the hallway outside. The distinct sound of high heels clicking on the marble floor approached, sharp, authoritative, rhythmic. That click, that clack, click, that clack. It sounded like a countdown. To Jacob frowned. That didn't sound like a secretary. That sounded like power. This is a calm before the storm. Jacob is celebrating a touchdown while the other team is still on the field with the ball. He thinks the game is over. He has no clue he is about to get tackled. The door handle turned. Jacob put on his best winning smile, ready to greet the frail old lady he expected to manipulate. The boardroom was full. The lawyers were ready. The contracts were on the table. Jacob sat at the right hand of the head chair, exuding confidence. "So," Jacob started, taking control of the room. "That as we discussed, the restructuring plan is aggressive but necessary. We cut the bottom 20 of the workforce immediately to efficiency is key. The board members exchanged glances but didn't interrupt. They were waiting for majority shareholder Maggie Winslow. MS. Winslow is usually very punctual. One director noted, "Don't worry." Jacob waved a hand. "I'm sure she's just old and slow. We can probably start without her. I could walk her through the big words later." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Jacob's disrespect for the undercovers, continued even in her absence. He was digging a hole deeper and deeper. He pulled out the gold pen, spinning it between his fingers. "I have to say, gentlemen, this building needs a cleanse. The staff I've encountered, subpar, especially the janitorial team, just had to fire one for theft right before you walked in. Doc, can you believe it? Stealing right under my nose." He shook his head, playing the hero. "We need better security, better people, my people." He was painting himself as the savior of the company, the business tycoon who would bring order to chaos. He was completely unaware that the thief he fired was a woman whose signature he needed on that paper. The karma was building up like pressure in a pipe, ready to burst. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Actually, a voice came from the intercom, and Winslow is entering the room now. To Jacob straightened his tie the time Maggie had fixed it. Finally, he muttered, "Let's get this over with." He stood up, buttoning his jacket, preparing to shake the hand of an elderly woman he intended to bulldoze. He expected a walker. He expected confusion. He expected a frail target. He looked at the door with a predatory gaze. He was ready to win. He was ready to be the boss. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Every eye was on the heavy oak doors. The anticipation is killing me. He is so smug. He is sitting there with the stolen pen, insulting the boss to her own board, thinking he is the king of the world. To watch closely now at the moment of truth is here. The handle turned. The door swung open. The door didn't just open. It was commanded open. That Maggie Winslow stepped the threshold, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. Gone was the gray wig, gone were the dirty coveralls and the worn-out sneakers. In their place stood a woman radiating power, and she wore a sharp, navy blue Italian suit that fit perfectly to her hair, was styled in a sleek silver bob. She wore heels that clicked with authority, and on her face, a look of absolute, steely determination. That Jacob's smile froze. He blinked, his brain trying to process the image to the face. He knew that face, that it was the cleaner's face, but polished, younger, sharper. "I apologize for the delay, gentlemen," Maggie said, her voice clear and common ding, no longer raspy and weak. "That I had some trash to take out." She walked ahead of the table, tossing a file down with a heavy thud. The board members stood up respectfully, as at Winslow. They greeted in unison. That Jacob remained seated, his mouth slightly opened. He looked from her face to her shoes' designer heels, not the sneakers he had mocked. He looked at her wrist, a vintage Patek Philippe, far more tasteful and expensive than his flashy Rolex. The shocking reveal hit him like a physical blow to the chest. "You," Jacob stammered, his voice cracking. "You're at the cleaner?" Maggie turned to him slowly, arching an elegant eyebrow. "I am Mr. Simpson. But today, yes, I was a cleaner, and I must say, you left quite a mess." The room went deathly silent. The office drama had just turned into a public execution. Jacob's face went from confusion to horror. The memories flooded back. The kicked bucket, the insults, the apple, the shoes, the tie, the planted pen. Every single moment of arrogance and cruelty played back in his mind in 4K resolution. He realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't just insulted a worker. He had insulted the one person who held his future in her hands. "That I don't understand," Jacob stuttered, sweating profusely now. "It was a test?" Maggie leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. "Life is a test, Jacob, and you failed every single subject." She looked at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. The undercover CEO guise was gone. Now, only the judge remained. Can you feel the temperature drop in that room? There's a feeling of power shifting. That Jacob is small now, tiny. He realizes that the nobody he stepped on is actually the giant he needs to bow to. It is the ultimate don't judge moment. Maggie pulled out a chair, not for herself, but to signal she was taking charge. "Shall we discuss your restructuring plan, Jacob? Or should we discuss your integrity?" Jacob turned a shade of pale that was almost green. That is confident facade crumbled completely. He looked around the table for support. But the board members were looking at him with cold, hard eyes. They sensed a shift. They knew Maggie that she was angry. There was a reason Jacob was alone on an island of his own, making the instant regret was washing over him in waves, suffocating him. Maggie Winslow, I had no idea. He tried to backtrack, his voice shaking. It was a joke, a misunderstanding. I was just stress testing the staff. It was a pathetic lie that Maggie didn't even blink. Stress testing. She repeated, "Is that what you call framing an employee for theft? Is that what you call mocking a starving woman? Is that what you call workplace harassment?" She walked slowly around the table towards him. That Jacob shrank in his chair. "You call me trash? Jacob, you said I belonged in the garbage. You kicked food out of my hand. You laughed at my poverty." And she stopped right behind him, leaning down to whisper in his ear, echoing his earlier move, "Who is the trash now?" The tables had turned so completely, it was dizzying. He tried to stand up to regain some height, but his legs felt weak to look. "Business is business. I would focus on the numbers." He pleaded the numbers. Maggie laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think you can build a business by stepping on people who build it? You are not a business tycoon. Jacob, you are a bully with a bank account." She reached into his pocket, the audacity left him paralyzed, and pulled out the gold pen. "And this," she said, holding it up to the light, "this is property of Winslow Enterprises, which, coincidentally, you accused me of stealing." She placed the pen on the table with a sharp click. "The irony is, you stole my dignity all day, but you couldn't steal my company." Jacob was hyperventilating. The billionaire dream was dissolving. He saw his commission, his reputation, his merger, all of it turned into smoke. He had been humiliated not by a rival, but by his own character flaws exposed by a cleaner. It was justice in its purest form. There's a special kind of fear when you realize you can't buy your way out of a problem, and Jacob is feeling that now. He is stripped bare, that no suit, no watch, no money can save him from the truth of who he is. It's a terrifying and beautiful sight. Maggie walked back to the table and sat down to security. She spoke into the intercom. "We have a trespasser in the boardroom." Wait. Jacob cried out, standing up. Now, desperation taking over. "You can't do this. We have a contract, a verbal agreement." Maggie picked up the gold pen. "This pen," she said, twirling it, "was a gift from my father. He taught me that a signature is only as good as a hand that writes it. And your hands, Jacob, are dirtied." She looked at the board. "This man framed me for stealing this pen. He planted it on me to get me fired because I was an inconvenience to his ego. Is this the kind of partner we want?" The board members shook their heads in disgust. "Absolutely not." One said disgraceful, said another the collective judgment was heavy. The pen was the final test, Maggie explained, her eyes locking with Jacob's. "If you had simply ignored me, you might have survived. If you had been just a little bit rude, we might have just renegotiated. But you chose to destroy me, that you chose to frame me. That is a lack of integrity that no amount of profit can fix." It was a shocking reveal of the depth of her test. She gave him rope. "And he hanged himself. You failed the lunch test. You failed the spill bucket test. You failed the intern test. And you failed the pen test." She listed them off like charges in a court. "You are legally and morally bankrupt in my eyes." She tossed the file. He had brought the merger agreement back across the table. It slid and fell onto the floor, landing right where he stood up. "Pick it up," she commanded softly. Jacob looked at the file on the floor. It was a mirror image of the Appleseed. He hesitated. His pride was fighting with his reality. Slowly, painfully, he bent down and picked up the papers. He was bowing to her. Finally, it was sweet revenge, poetic and perfect. "Get out," she said simply. "Before I call the police for filing a false report against my employee." That Jacob clutched his papers to his chest like a shield. He looked small. He looked defeated. The rude client was gone. Only a broken man remained. This is the climax. The moment the villain is disarmed, it proves that character is the ultimate currency. You can fake success, but you can't fake integrity. Jacob thought he was playing a game of money, but he was playing a game of life, and he lost. And Maggie turned her chair to face the window, dismissing him. "And Jacob, take the stairs. The elevators are for employees only." That Jacob walked out of the boardroom, the silence ringing his ears. He passed the security guards, Mike and Dave, who were now standing tall, grinning. "Need help finding the exit, sir?" Mike asked, mocking Jacob's earlier tone. Jacob didn't answer. He felt the weight of every insult he had thrown that day crashing down on him. He walked down the stairs 40 flights. With every step, he had time to think. He thought about the apple. He thought about the tide. He thought about the intern. He realized that the invisible people were the ones who actually ran the world. That by the time he reached the lobby, his legs were shaking and his Italian shoes were scuffed. He looked at the spot where he had kicked the bucket earlier. It was cleaned. He lost a deal. He lost millions. But as he walked out the glass doors, stripped his arrogance, he gained something else, a painful, searing life lesson. He realized that you never know who you are talking. He realized that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost you everything. That back in the penthouse, Maggie stood by the window, watching him leave. She wasn't gloating. She was sad that it had to come to this, but relieved that her company was safe as she turned to her team. Let's get back to work and give Leo the intern a raise. He handled himself well today. The story of the undercover CEO and the rude client became a legend at Winslow Enterprises. It was a reminder to everyone that dignity is non-negotiable, that Jacob Simpson never stepped foot in that building again. But rumor has it, the next time he saw a cleaner, he didn't just walk around. He said, "Good morning," that justice had been served, not with a gavel, but with a mop, a bucket, and a gold pen. And so the trash took itself out, and the castle remained clean. That is a story that reminds us, be kind. Always, you never know who is watching. And more importantly, you have to live with yourself. That Jacob learned the hard way that while a suit might open doors, only character keeps them open. That true power isn't about who you can fire, it's about who you can lift up. That if you also believe that kindness is the ultimate sign of strength, then you have found your home here. Subscribe and join our community of change makers who value the person, not the paycheck. Let's make some noise together that like this video to help spread this message of humility to those who need it most. Comment below with the word respect if you agree that no job is too small to deserve dignity, and share this story with a friend to remind them that you never know who you are actually talking about. And the journey doesn't end here. To our channel is a treasure chest filled with emotional sagas and shocking reveals. Just like this Oniso, go ahead, dive into our older videos and uncover more hidden gems. And to ensure you aren't left behind when the next big story drops, turn on that notification bell right now. You definitely do not want to miss the emotional roller coaster we are preparing for you next.